Hello and good evening. I'm Dr. Brian Henning, and I'm a professor of philosophy and environmental studies here at Gonzaga University, where I also have the honor of directing the Institute for Climate, Water, and the Environment. Thank you so much for joining us here this evening. It's my pleasure to serve as the moderator for this, the 6th annual Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum. Thank you for joining us here in the Globe Room, or many of you online, live streaming at home. To welcome you this evening, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Mia Bertagnolli, who will help us to welcome, if you would, just help her welcome her to the stage with a round of applause. Dr. Bertagnolli was appointed as interim provost at Gonzaga University in July of this year, and is a graduate of Gonzaga. She earned her PhD in biology from the University of Utah, and we're fortunate that she returned here to her alma mater to begin her teaching career, and has been with us ever since, doing all sorts of wonderful things for us, now as our interim provost. And so please join me in welcoming Dr. Mia Bertagnolli.
Thank you, Brian. On behalf of Gonzaga University, I would like to welcome the candidates, students, faculty, staff, and community members who are here tonight. Thank you so much for joining us. Civic dialogue is central to Gonzaga as an institution of higher education. Respecting differences, exchanging ideas, seeking understanding, bridging divides, and working towards the common good are hallmarks of an Ignatian education. The Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum, hosted by Gonzaga University since 2019, is a great example of those principles in action. Gonzaga seeks to provide opportunities for real dialogue and engagement on today's pressing issues. Thank you again for your time tonight and your commitment as a citizen to democratic deliberations.
Appreciate it. Thank you so much for helping us set the tone tonight, Dr. Bertagnolli. We're happy to host the 6th annual Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum as part of our For Our Common Home lecture series, which brings together scholars, thought leaders, policymakers from diverse fields. We have 3 more events, as you can see on the screen, coming up this semester, and would encourage you to attend. They're all free, and if you go to gonzaga.edu/climate events, you can register. You can also find a number of our past events on our YouTube channel at Gonzaga Climate. Hosting events such as this, as you might imagine, and doing all of the work we do in the community to advance climate literacy and climate resilience takes considerable resources. And so if you have the means, please consider supporting the Climate Institute with a donation. And of course, as you imagine, an event of this sort also requires a lot of hands to make it possible. So I'd like to begin by thanking a number of colleagues who helped make this possible, including all the wonderful Climate Institute staff who did such a nice job of organizing us tonight, our timekeeper, Carly Hohenbein, our audiovisual expert, Nick Albano in the back, our event manager, Patrick Pajek, the Climate Institute's student event communication assistant, Sydney Ashby, who helped to do a lot of the media around this and is a little bit ill tonight and not able to be with us. And most especially our amazing program assistant, Caitlin Carroll, who makes it all happen. So the 6th annual Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum is hosted by the Institute here, but also in partnership with all of the wonderful organizations you see on the screen, many of whom are with us over here on the walls. And I encourage you to find them online. If you're not already affiliated with them, get on their mailing list, send them a little bit of money to do the amazing work that they do in the community, and see them afterwards to learn about how you can support the really important work that they do in our community. I'm especially excited this year that we have the League of Women Voters here with us, because if you aren't already registered to vote, they can help you to get registered. Is that true? Ish? Ish, okay. Talk to them about how to register at least. So thank you all for being here. The forum, as I mentioned, was created 6 years ago out of the belief that climate change is an issue of vital importance to our community and to the world. Contrary to how it's commonly presented, climate change isn't primarily a partisan issue. According to surveys by the Yale Center for Climate Communication, 72% of Americans describe themselves as either cautious, concerned, or alarmed about global warming, whereas only 22% describe themselves as either doubtful or dismissive. The great majority of people in Spokane are interested in candidates' views on global warming and what a candidate would or would not do to help Spokane mitigate its causes and adapt to its effects. With increasingly frequent wildfire smoke and heat waves, it's urgent that candidates who want to represent us share their views on climate change. So once again, welcome and thank you so much for attending the 6th Annual Spokane Candidates Climate Change Forum. If you've been with us before, you know that one of the things we try to do is to make sure that we have an opportunity to have a civil and thoughtful discussion. So we have these rules of engagement. Climate change can generate strong feelings, and so but it's important that we focus on allowing the candidates to share their views without being interrupted. And so the cards on your chair are an opportunity to participate without disrupting the proceedings. And so there should be no booing, no clapping, no cheering. If a candidate says something that you like, then you can hold up the green sheet. And if the candidate says something that you disagree with, you can hold up the red sheet. So if you don't have any of those, I think we might still have some extra, so raise your hand and folks will be able to get you some if you don't already have them. So let's practice. Hold up either a green sheet of approval or a red sheet of disapproval to the following question. I haven't asked a question yet, but I like your eagerness. So the question is, do you think it's important that candidates for local office share their views on climate change? Self-selected audience, I know. Well done. Okay, thank you so much. The forum follows a format similar to some of the presidential debates. We will start with opening statements of up to 2 minutes from the candidates, and then we'll proceed to questions. Candidates will have 2 minutes to respond to the question, and there will be up to 1 minute for additional redirection at the discretion of one of the moderators. At the end of their segment, candidates have the option, if they would like to deliver a 90-second closing statement. So 2-minute opening, questions of 2-minute answers apiece, and then 90-second closing. In keeping with our tradition, the forum will be co-moderated by 2 Gonzaga students, and this year we have with us Jordan Kremer and CJ Kreitlow. Audience, as we have not yet started the questions, would you join me in welcoming them to the stage? So Jordan is a Gonzaga senior studying environmental science with a minor in history. Originally from Encinitas, California, she enjoys working with the Climate Institute's literacy project to help young people understand climate change. Our second student moderator this evening is CJ, who is also a senior at Gonzaga, majoring in environmental studies with minors in history and in Spanish. Originally from Wisconsin, CJ enjoys working with the Climate Institute's Resilience Project to build resilience to the impacts of climate change in the inland Northwest. This year, the forum will be divided into 2 segments, with the first segment focusing on county commissioner, and the second focused on the state legislature. So let's start by explaining just briefly how the county commissioner races work. And I know this is hard to see if we're going to see all of the county in one image. Spokane County is divided into 5 different districts now. You can see pretty well at least those 3. And to zoom in, those are the other 2. This year, candidates for districts 1, 3, and 5 are up for election. After the primaries, we invited each of the 4 candidates running for Spokane County Commissioner to join us tonight. Candidates Josh Kearns, Chris Jordan, and Al French regrettably all declined to join us this evening. We leave it to you to decide how to interpret candidates' decisions not to attend this forum. However, we are delighted that we do have with us this evening Molly Marshall, who is running against Al French in District 5. Audience, suspending briefly our rule of engagement, join me in welcoming candidate Molly Marshall to the stage. So candidate Marshall, to remind you of our format, Jordan or CJ will ask you a question. You'll have 2 minutes to respond. We'll have up to 1 minute for redirection. But here at the beginning, you will have up to 2 minutes for an opening statement. So if you would like to, feel free to share your opening.
So, hello, I am Molly Marshall, running for County Commissioner, District 5. It's very strange to be the only one up here, but pleased to be here. Thank you for the invite. I'm really glad to be here. This is my first time ever running for political office. I am a 34-year resident of Spokane, and when I got out of high school, I joined the Air National Guard to pay for college, joined as an Airman Basic. During that time that I served, I was a boom operator, so I flew on the KC-135, did the air refueling, was able to get my degree at Eastern and get my commission and became a pilot. And after 30 years, I retired as a lieutenant colonel. After that, I got very busy with my community. I became a community activist. I joined my neighborhood council and became a member of the Land Use Council on the Community Assembly on their executive board. And I was very concerned about what was happening in my neighborhood, so decided to take action. Things started getting worse in our neck of the woods, took it one step further and became a community organizer. Co-founded a grassroots community organization called Citizen Action for Latah Valley. So what we did in that organization is we mobilized the entire Latah Valley because we had some serious public safety issues surrounding transportation, wildfire issues. There's no public transportation in Latah Valley. South of I-90, there's none. So serious issues. I took it one step further, decided to run, and why I decided to run is because I saw a gap in leadership. And I thought I had the skills, and it was the right timing, so I stepped up to run for county commissioner.
Thank you so much, candidate Marshall. I forgot to mention, and my colleague is probably remembering that I forgot to mention that Carly here in the front row will be helping keep time. So right here, you raise your hand, there you go. And so she has, and for the other candidates, I'll mention it as well, a 20-second sign and then a stop sign. It's just so you can have a sense of pacing. All right, so let's go ahead and get started with the first question from Jordan.
Thank you for being with us here tonight, candidate Marshall. As you know, with over 500,000 people, Spokane County is the 4th largest county in our state and the largest county in eastern Washington. Yet, despite its size, Spokane County does not have any concrete goals to reduce climate pollution or plans for helping community adapt to a changing climate. This brings me to my question. Candidate Marshall, if elected as Spokane County Commissioner, would you support the adoption of specific climate pollution reduction goals and the development of concrete plans to achieve them? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I think there needs to be a serious commitment at the county to reduce, or to set some goals to reduce our climate change issues. I think that we have an excellent opportunity at the county right now because we're in the process of doing a comp plan update. In that comp plan update, they are putting in a section for climate resiliency. And there's 2 different programs they're gonna start running. One of them is a climate advisory board and another one a rural and agricultural advisory board. I think this is a great opportunity for the county to kind of elevate the leadership and the experts that we have in the county to really dedicate our time, our money, and our commitment to handle this climate change.
Thank you, candidate Marshall.
Good evening, candidate Marshall. For my first question, I'd like to focus on how we can thoughtfully plan to ensure there is sufficient housing for all people while preserving our remaining natural spaces. If elected as Spokane County Commissioner, would you focus on increasing the density of development in existing population centers or look to encourage the development of new lands? Is it possible to conserve open spaces while also increasing in population size? If so, how exactly would you achieve this? What concrete plans would you advance? So candidate Marshall, the question is, if elected, would you support increasing the development of open spaces or encourage more density? What specific plans would you support or not support as Spokane County grows? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I definitely would support density, but density within areas that have services. So if you know anything about Latah Valley, we have a serious issue with building that is at the extent of our infrastructure. So we're putting pressure on our infrastructure right now, and having to build more infrastructure. Most of these developments in the last 10 years throughout the county on the outskirts of the city of Spokane are all car dependent. There is no public transportation. So my thought, and really something that just really drives me is the policy shift of building houses within the municipalities. There's so many that already have services in the centers and corridors. So we make connected communities that are resilient. We have an opportunity now, because we are in a housing crisis, to build this housing immediately, but build it so it's sustainable. And build houses or build communities that are walkable, livable, and have those services, and aren't going to cost as much because we're relying on the infrastructure that's already in place.
So to clarify, if the comprehensive plan was approved in 2026 and recommended annexing or expanding the boundaries of cities, would you support expanding the population size or the geographical reach of those municipalities? If you were asked, if it came to you as, we want to grow the boundaries of the cities within the county, would you support that?
I think I would consider it, but it'd have to be the right place. There's certain areas that we should not be building, and you talked about preserving open space. There's a lot of open space out there that we really need to take a look at and preserve. So I guess the answer would be maybe. I would consider it.
Thank you.
Most counties of Spokane size employ staff dedicated to the creation, implementation, and tracking of climate plans and initiatives. It is my understanding that at present, Spokane County has no staff dedicated to this work. Can we foresee support for the hiring of dedicated staff to work on creating and implementing climate plans? Candidate Marshall, if elected, would you support the hiring of dedicated staff to work on sustainability and climate initiatives at the county level? Why or why not? You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, I would support hiring dedicated staff, but I think we already have that staff in place at the county. We have experts at the county, and kind of as I mentioned before in the comp plan update, we're going to add in our climate resiliency chapter 2 different agencies that are going to work on these things. So what I see is using the experts that we already have, because there's quite a few, increasing their leadership ability and their responsibility, and having dedicated staff for this issue.
I'm actually involved in the county's comprehensive planning discussions, and having met with the county planning staff who are working to implement the commerce guidance for the implementing the new climate element to the comprehensive plan, they have not described themselves as experts or actually having particular expertise in this area. They are hiring some consultants, but I'm not sure it's true that there's anybody at the county who is an expert in this, and the county and the community members who are volunteering their time can't be counted as county staff working on this issue. So if it were true, or if you found that there weren't actually any experts leading this work at the county level, would you support making such a position?
Yeah, I think it's really important, because to make change, we have to have a serious policy shift and really commit to our climate change resiliency plan.
Thanks. All right, so we went through that really pretty fast. I think we've got one more question from CJ.
Yes. For our next question, I'd like to discuss transportation. As you might know, in Washington State, transportation is among the largest sectoral sources of the emissions that are warming the earth and causing devastating changes to our climate. History suggests that building more roads creates more traffic and more congestion, not the reverse. Yet there's relatively little action outside of the city of Spokane to encourage public transportation. Candidate Marshall, do you support expanding and improving public transportation? If so, what specifically would you support? Would you do to support the improvement and expansion of public transportation in the areas of the county outside of the city? You have 2 minutes.
Sure. Yeah, transportation is what connects our communities. And what makes District 5 so unique are, the towns of Cheney, Medical Lake, Airway Heights. We have an Air Force base, we have the airport. So those areas are so disconnected. We need to expand our services to these areas. And then, as I mentioned, we're building on the fringes and we're building where there are not services. We have very little public transportation there. But there's even places in the city like Indian Trail that have like one bus. The northwest neighborhoods have no buses. We really need to take a look at this because we have so many car-dependent developments that it just doesn't make sense. But back to the rural areas, being able to connect communities is so important. It wasn't until I think last year that STA actually put a bus between Airway Heights and Cheney. So why is that important? Well, the kids in Airway Heights, they actually go to Cheney High School. So if you do not have a car, how do you get to high school? Maybe a school bus, but what if your kids participate in sports? And parents might not have that transportation. How would you get there? So they finally put a bus stop in. However, it takes almost an hour to get from Airway Heights to Cheney. We can do better. We need to do better. These communities are they're connected, but we need to connect them just even with the schools and things like that. So really am committed to increasing our public transportation opportunity.
Another good example that, similar to what you were mentioning perhaps, is that there is service between here and Cheney, let's say. A lot of people live here and go to school at Eastern, and they've added stops, but what that's done, it seems, is just made it an interminably long commute now. So would you support increasing service, or would you, provide more resources to STA?
Yeah, I think there's opportunity there, and I think it would be great to get together as a community and figure out exactly what we need. So Cheney's going to have a different need than the city of Spokane, but look at ways maybe where we can expand service or make it more rapid transit. I think there's opportunity there.
Thank you, Candidate Marshall.
All right, Candidate Marshall, if you'd like to share a closing statement, please feel free.
Yeah, so I know we're at a crossroads right here, right now with this election. We get to choose status quo or we get to choose something different. And I don't mean this just for this race. So with climate change, though, it's really going to take a shift in policy and a shift of policymakers. But it's also going to take a commitment from our community to get on board, and together we need to be able to make this change. So come November 5th, I want you to do your homework and really look at the candidates that are committed to doing this, because if we can't make that change now, we're going to be that further behind. So register to vote and vote. And I would sure appreciate your vote on November 5th. Thank you.
Just the sheets. Thank you. Appreciate it. I know she's the only one up here, but we need to set the right tone for the next segment. Thank you so much, Candidate Marshall, for joining us. One of the things that when we created this forum, the idea was to get to a point, and we will get to that point, where nobody would run for local office without having thoughtful things to say, regardless of what party they would affiliate themselves with, about climate change. It's too important of an issue to be able to run for local office without having thoughtful views. And we'll get to a point where no candidate for local office will feel like they can run without being able to come to this forum and tell you what they think. So thank you for taking the time to be here and share your views. And now we may thank her with a round of applause. Okay, so our second segment this evening, as I mentioned at the top, is focused on the Washington State Legislature, specifically focusing on the 3rd Legislative District and the 6th Legislative District. So for those of you who are less familiar with how those work, the State Legislative District for the 3rd is on your screen right now. It takes up, as you can see, much of, but not all of Spokane. And then the 6th wraps, so the Spokane is in your right-hand corner now, and the 6th Legislative District wraps around much of Spokane to our west and to our north from where we are right now. As always, after the primaries, we invited all of the candidates running for the state legislature in the 3rd and the 6th. And one candidate, Mike Voles, declined our invitation to attend. And one candidate, Jenny Graham, did not respond to our repeated invitations. However, we're very fortunate that many others did answer positively our invitation to attend. And so I'm really excited that we have so many folks with us this evening to be able to share their views. And so candidates, as I call your name, if you'd please join me at the stage. And audience, we can suspend our rules of engagement and welcome each candidate with a warm round of applause. So alphabetically, by district and office, I would start with Marcus Riccelli, candidate for State Senator, District 3. Jim Wilson, candidate for State Senate, District 3. Natasha Hill, candidate for State Representative, Position 1, District 3. Tony Keepy, candidate for State Representative, Position 1, District 3. Tim Ormsby, candidate for State Representative, Position 2, District 3. Stephen McCrae, candidate for State Representative, Position 1, District 6. And Michaela Kelso, candidate for State Representative, Position 2, District 6. Sorry that it's a little bit crowded up here. You'll have to get a little bit cozy. Hopefully you can all fit. So Tim, you are in the middle. Yeah. Oh, Tim's there. Tony, you're right here. Yep. Oh, we have 7 seats. I know we do. Wait. Now we have a superabundance of candidates, which is not a bad thing. That's actually a really, really good thing. Okay, so candidates, to remind you of our format, CJ or Jordan will pose a question. You'll have up to 2 minutes to respond. At the moderator's discretion, there'll be up to a minute of additional time for further discussion. Our timekeeper, Carly, here in the front row, will hold up a sign that says 20 seconds left and a sign that says stop when time is up. If you could, please keep an eye on the timekeeper so everyone has an equal chance to share their views. And audience, remember that if you'd like to express your views from here on, use the red and green cards, but please don't cheer or boo or clap or otherwise make noise. Just use the red and the green cards. So candidates, let's start with the opening statements, beginning from right to left, starting with candidate Riccelli.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate the attendance and the folks watching online. It's great to be back here at Gonzaga. I'm an alum from 2000, and actually important for me as how I came to serve in the State House. I was elected in 2012. I've been serving in our State House, but I was a business major. I came to Gonzaga to make a bunch of money, and the Jesuits influenced me with political science, philosophy, ethics, and really that service to others kind of ethos, which I translated to public service, and it really changed the trajectory of my life and what I focused on. And so I've been honored to serve as your state representative. For the last 2 years, I've chaired our House Healthcare Committee, which I think is very important when we're talking about the health considerations of climate impact. I served 5 years as our House Democrats Majority Whip on our leadership team and try to bring a strong Eastern Washington voice to our statewide issues and make sure that we're fully represented. I'm excited to be running for the state Senate. It's a chance for me to go back to a place where I served as a staff member for then State Senate Majority Leader Lisa Brown and build upon the work that I've done. I'll continue to focus heavily on health and making sure that folks have access to affordably quality health care. But for the topic of tonight, I really want to make sure that my kids and future generations have an opportunity to have a future that is good. They have a Spokane River that they can play in that's free of toxins. On a macro level, I'm a soccer coach, and we have a whole new season here in Spokane. It's called fire season, where I have to take those 14-year-olds or those 11-year-olds, and I can't let them play outside because our earth is just truly on fire. And so I'm looking forward to policy interventions that can work. I'll continue to build upon my strong results, and that includes in some transportation work that I'll chat with you later, but I'm going to stay on track and not get the stop sign.
Candidate Wilson, you have 2 minutes for an opening statement.
I'm Jim Wilson, and I'm running for the State Senate in the 3rd Legislative District. I'm honored to be here tonight in a quasi-educational setting because I haven't been in one of those for a long time. I'm honored and I'm privileged. I'm one of the few people in Spokane that had the privilege of meeting directly with Pope Francis in Rome with a personal audience. And in that realm, I'm going to proceed based on his second encyclical, which had to deal with the environment. I'm not going to repeat the whole encyclical to you tonight, thank God. But I'm going to reiterate it into the extent that we are all citizens of this great earth. We have the right and responsibility to preserve it, not only for ourselves, but our future generations. And in that regard, I take this very seriously. I'm not a career politician. I'm joking, I joke a lot. But I think we need to approach this in a way that's both respectful and collaborative. When you approach these things out of disrespect, you build walls. And so I'm approaching this in the spirit of humility, which in the Catholic faith, thank you, is the basis of virtue. There's a reason we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. And we have the need to listen to each other, even though we may disagree at certain aspects of where we're coming from at a certain point. We get to learn from each other with the idea of producing results that are going to be great for the humankind and our great earth. And in this realm, I want to proceed, and I want to thank you again for letting me be here.
Thank you so much, Candidate Wilson. Candidate Hill, would you like to share an opening? And we're going to share some of the mics, so.
All right.
I'll just turn them all on. You just leave them all on. All right, there you go.
Thank you. Natasha Hill, and I'm running for State House Representative here in our 3rd Legislative District. This is my second run for office. My first run was for Congress back in 2022. I really got into politics wanting to really influence more folks to join me from communities that have been left behind. I grew up here in Spokane, Hilliard neighborhood, went to Rogers High School, did community college as a Running Start student, and then transferred to the University of Washington over in Seattle. For me, I felt growing up here in Spokane that I needed to leave in order to have the experiences and opportunities, and coming back, I see that I was wrong. But it took leaving and coming back for me to have that appreciation. So I think part of my message, not just as a candidate, but as a community organizer and advocate, is to let students know that these opportunities that you have here in Spokane are just as great as you can have anywhere else. And I don't mean just here in our state or in our country, but across the world. And I think as you grow and you get older and more experienced, you just tend to have that appreciation. So I left for law school. I've been an attorney now 17 years. I have 2 children. They're now 14 and 8 years old. So I'm a single parent raising kids here in public school, and things are not what they used to be. And so there's some positives with that. We've definitely grown as a city and as a county. Eastern Washington has changed a lot. It's definitely more diverse. You see that with the different groups of people here. You used to not have to ask people where they were from because you knew they were from here. Why else would they be here? That's changed a lot, and Gonzaga is one of the reasons why that's changed. Gonzaga has a lot of growing to do as well, though, and we need help from students like you all who are here in this room to help us get there. So I hope that come November, you are all talking to friends and family, influencing the people that you know to show up and vote. You have this opportunity to learn about candidates and what they stand for, and I intend to be a champion for women's rights, for labor, and for housing, because until we solve the issue of poverty, all of these symptoms of public health and safety are going to persist. And I know together we have common goals and that we can achieve them.
Thank you, Candidate Hill. Candidate Keepy, would you like to share an opening?
Absolutely. Thank you for being here. Let me be here. I am Tony Keepy. I'm running for state rep in the 3rd District. Our area goes from Eagle Ridge to Havana to basically Francis, the 53rd, all your downtown.
A little bit closer.
All the downtown. Oh, that's much better. I can hear myself. Sometimes I don't want to hear myself. But, you know, I'm on the Spokane County Water Conservancy Board. What I want to see, I want clean air, clean water. And I really enjoy being on the board. We look at water rights. We take water rights and we combine them from the ground surface water to river water to well water and make them better, more efficient, where you have so many gallons per minute you can use. So I'm really glad we do that. We have our waste management center here in Spokane on Freya. All of your sewage goes down to that center, and then it's cleaned and goes back into the river. It's cleaner after it is cleaned. So that is important to me. At one time, I did not like the electric buses. I said, that was a lot of money we're spending on electric buses. What good is that going to do? They're going to be slow, not efficient. But to see what's happened, to me, our electric buses are very fast. They're clean. They're not leaving all that fuel, that diesel fuel, right behind you. I like that. I mean, I'm here to listen and learn. I don't know everything. I'm here to hear from you, what's best for you, because the climate people are very passionate about. And people vote for one issue, climate. You know, I vote for all the issues. So I'm here to listen and learn, and I appreciate you letting me attend.
Thank you, candidate Keepy. Candidate Ormsby, would you like to share an opening?
Thank you, Dr. Henning. Thank you to Gonzaga, to the Climate Institute, and to our student leaders. And that's important to me. I'm 65 years old. Climate was not an issue when I was younger. It became an issue over time, and my climate journey was kind of founded in ignorance initially. And 20 years ago, I remember being on the dais at a local organization and heard one of our community leaders talk about it being a hoax. And a friend of mine, Julian Powers, who was very much an activist in the climate space, pulled me aside and lectured me as though I had said it. And I was like, Julian, it wasn't me, I swear. But he really got me thinking about it, the journey that it's going to take. I'm a concrete finisher by trade, not college educated, finished concrete. Cement is one of the biggest contributors to greenhouse gas. I had no idea during all the years that we were slinging mud around doing sidewalks and floors and curbs and bridge decks and everything else about what a contributor it was. And I didn't want to be part of an industry that was a culprit, but I didn't find out until later, right? And so part of this is allowing ourselves the grace to mature into a space where we're taking action. I have an affinity for Gonzaga, being as that when I returned to from the hospital as a newborn, was 7 blocks away. I currently live 7 blocks and 1 house away from that, and this has always been my neighborhood, and I've always appreciated the youth, the vibrancy, and the new thinking. And as a long-time state rep, I'm going into my 11th term. I look forward to these challenges and coming up with innovative solutions, and I think they're going to originate with our young folks, whether it's climate, gun safety, or gender rights. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Ormsby. Candidate McCrae, would you like to share an opening statement?
My name is Stephen McCrae, and I'm running for the Washington State House of Representatives in the 6th Legislative District for Position 1. I am currently an elected Water Commissioner for District 10 of Spokane County, and I serve on the Governor's Committee for Disability Issues and Employment for the state of Washington. My family has lived in Washington State since the 1890s. We have a family ranch that's out in western Spokane County, and it is a micro example of what climate change can do. My great-grandfather chose the location for the family farm because water bubbled out of the ground everywhere he looked when he rode his horse out there in 1917. Now when you go out on our family ranch, the swamps are just about dried up. The watersheds are 5 to 6 feet below their historical levels. Just this last year, we had the second major wildfire rage across our family ranch, and it took over 840 acres of our family farm, burning 99% of the timber on our ranch. 5 years before that, we had the Silver Lake fire that went across our farm, and it burned over 240 acres of our family ranch. we are seeing little to no actual meaningful response from the current legislative leadership that is in the 6th. And I find this to be a sad failure on their part. We also have the situation that is coming off the airport with the PFAS situation, as well as Fairchild International Airport. And we are finding that we are having toxins across our entire county. And we are finding that certain leadership in our local government has ignored and neglected this situation. And I am hoping that I can find meaningful resources to address both of these situations when I'm elected to our legislature. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Candidate Kelso, would you like to share an opening?
Yes, thank you so much for having us. I'm Michelle Kelso. I am running for position 2 in the 6th Legislative District. I'm so happy to be here again. 2 years ago, that was quite the experience. I am running for many of the reasons that you've already heard. I was not born in this country. I immigrated in 1993 from Germany. And in 1995, I joined the United States Army. After 23 and a half years on active duty, I retired in 2018, and we had bought our place in North Spokane County a few years before that. Ever since we finally got to move here, I have been just so amazed by the resiliency and by the beauty of Spokane County and the surrounding areas. It is very important for me that we preserve and protect our natural spaces while also having the best resources for the people who live here. If we don't have a healthy environment, we cannot have a good economy. If we don't have a healthy environment, our children, for which we need good education, they won't have anything to look forward to. We want to make sure that our future is as bright for our children and grandchildren as it appeared to be for my generation. When I'm elected, I hope to be a more responsive representative. Right now, our legislators are in the minority, and they're either not willing or not able to work with the majority, which leaves us unrepresented in the 6th Legislative District. And I hope to change that. Environmentally, I hope to help the county and the surrounding areas to get a good comprehensive plan going. It is so important that when we, darn, I missed the 20-second cutoff, I'm so sorry. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Candidate Kelso. I think we're now ready to proceed to our first question. We'll rotate through each of the candidates so that different people have a chance to start, and we'll begin having CJ ask the first question.
Hello, candidates. I'd like to start with a question related to climate change and water use. On average, Spokane County residents consume a shocking 177 gallons of water per day, putting our consumption in the top of communities in the United States. In fact, according to U.S. Geological Survey, 177 gallons is more than twice the national average, which is estimated to be around 82 gallons of water per day. Candidates, please outline the most important steps that we can undertake to lessen our water consumption footprint, reduce negative impacts to Spokane water flows, and make our Spokane River climate resilient into next generation. Candidate Wilson, first to you. How can the Washington legislators support municipalities in our county to at once regulate and incentivize the conservation of water and thereby reduce the impacts to our groundwater in a changing climate? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. I think a lot of it has to do when you do legislation on a state level, you have to be able to I think you have to be able to customize legislation for local work. Each area of the state has a little bit different situation, so I think it's difficult from a state level to mandate anything specific to for example, Seattle has a different type of a situation than Spokane County. But I think we're at the county level, I think we're doing a lot of those things already, and the city level, by changing how we water our lawns, how we landscape our properties, and that type of thing. So I think those are the methods we have to do.
So in that regard, what specific actions that are currently in place would you continue to support?
Well, I think we don't need to water our lawns every day. We don't need to water our lawns extensively, for example. I think we want to promote rather than mandate people using materials that are native to the area. For example, Spokane County, certain grasses are native. They use less water, for example, than if you bring in plants from other areas of the world, that type of thing.
Thank you, Candidate Wilson. Candidate Hill, now to you. Again, the question is, how can the Washington legislator support municipalities in our county to at once regulate and incentivize the conservation of water and thereby reduce the impacts to our groundwater in a changing climate? You have 2 minutes.
All right, thank you. I think the most important part to that question is how we can work together. At the state level, obviously, a lot of what we do as state legislators is we work with a budget. We have to look at policies and programs and implementation and what that actually costs. So those are some of the concerns that we look at. My future seatmate, Tim Ormsby, definitely has his thumb on that in terms of the committee that he serves on with appropriations. So understanding that the state needs to work with our counties and our local city governments as well. We have seen some change in terms of what we're doing at the local level, incentivizing individual homeowners, residents to cut back on when they water their lawn. So to Jim's point, that's one area. We know that this goes far beyond that. A lot of this has to do with water waste, upgrades that we can make, things like that. There's also aspects of this that deal with different neighborhoods. And so some of the things that we need to look at is how is this impacting different neighborhoods and where is the water being used and how is that being used? Given that we have such beautiful outdoors, that we do have a need for water here, how are we using that water? But again, how we work together is really important. I agree that a mandate statewide is not how you do it, but when we look at water usage here locally or at the county level, how do we incentivize not just individual homeowners, but our commercial businesses, our companies, our larger organizations to also be conserving water in those ways. So what I would look to is what are we doing now? What can we do different? What's the impact that some of these local changes have had? How can we strengthen those? But I know at the state level, a lot of what we do is we look at what the budget is and what these policies and programs are. How do we make them more efficient so they're worth our dollars? And how do we get the impact that we need to reduce that water waste?
Thank you, Candidate Hill. Now to you, Candidate Keepy. If elected, what would you support or regulate to incentivize the conservation of water?
I'll tell you, my knowledge right now is being on the Spokane Conservancy Water Board. We look at the EQ values. How much water is going through our river? How much per day? If we're going to take water out, at the end of the day, how much water is still there in the river? Then we take a 30-day samples before we can approve something or not approve something. We want to know exactly what people are taking out of the water. So it's from the aquifer, and what we're seeing with the data is that more water is coming into our reservoir, aquifer, than is going out per day. That's a fact. So as far as what we want to do, because being on the ACC, Agriculture Control Committee in Eagle Ridge, we look at greenscapes. We're promoting that. We have a lot of neighbors are putting in rock gardens, and when they want to do one, it has to go through the ACC to get approved, and we tell them, look at the city guidelines. They have guidelines where you have to have so many plants, so many shrubs still in your rock garden, and water with a drip water. So whatever guidelines you want to use following the city, we will support. And that's really nice that to see more and more neighbors are putting in greenscape yards to conserve water. So I'll support those efforts and issues, but I can't tell you how much water you can or can't use on a state level, so, or even a local level. But we do have rules on how much water you can take out of a well per day, and that is pretty well done. And one of the programs we're working on right now is they're taking 3 wells. Instead of watching how much water they take out of each well within their well rights, that they want to smooth the water so they're still using the same amount of water to farm their lands in all 3, with the 3 wells. I mean, to me, that's a simple process. Let's not make it difficult for the farmer, where they're watching how much water comes out of well 1, how much water coming out of well 2, how much water coming out of well 3. Now they can smooth the water and make sure their crops are watered so we have food to eat.
Just to clarify something you mentioned, Candidate Keepy, I think you made the claim that there's more water going into the aquifer than coming out. Wouldn't that depend on where you're measuring and what time of the year? If you're above the city or below the city, if it's August or it's May, I would assume that you would get quite different answers.
Oh, absolutely. You have to look at the year average. So by looking at the year average, 12-month average, you get the better results. But if you do your water measurements just right before the mountains start running or during the heat of the season, you're going to get less water. And that time of year, we want to be more conservative, but there's plenty of water coming in and out.
So on the annual basis, but in August, when there hasn't been water for 3 months and we're watering our lawns, that would be a little bit different.
You're going to see less water going through the river at that time than you're going to see in January and February when the water starts melting.
Thanks for clarifying.
Thank you, Candidate Keepy. Now to you, Candidate Ormsby. If elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
I think Ms. Hill landed on it. At the state level, we have this natural tension with local governments, city and county, because we're trying to get them to do stuff, and it's a little carrot and a little stick to get them in alignment with state priorities that the legislature has designed. And they're pretty clever about avoiding the stick and getting the carrot, but not actually getting to the point where the policies have changed. Now, I think the other part of this is awareness, and I think the Spokane Aquifer Joint Board has done it. I thought that was a very clever thing. It's like, take care of our aquifer, or something about it's beneath you to not take care of it, something like that. And I think it is awareness, and we spend quite a bit of money in those education areas. I think curriculum at schools is important, and I think we've seen a real emphasis in schools. The other part of it is, on the awareness side, is hydrological mapping was not being done very well, say 20 years ago, 25. We had a general understanding, but we've gotten a lot more specific about the puts and takes of water levels. We've been mining ancient water for years in some areas of the state, and while it might not be where we live, it's going to be very important for families, because cities, for farms, because of eggs reliance on water, and for fish, for the survival rates of our species, our aquatic species. Oh, good. I was worried I was going to have too much time left. And so I think it is awareness, it's education, and again, it goes back to the next generations of folks, and I'm not abdicating my responsibility here, but you're going to get a lot better results from folks that have been exposed to it through their entire life, unlike me, only more recently.
Candidate Ormsby, you made an interesting comment there that municipalities are good at avoiding the stick and finding the carrot. What would you do as a legislator to try to reduce that phenomenon taking place as a lawmaker? Is there something you could do to address that problem?
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, you never find out at the time. You always find out after the fact. And you know,
you've been 11 terms, so you've seen this a few times. So I'm assuming you've learned some lessons. What would you say could be done to fix that problem in the way you craft legislation to be able to achieve the intended outcome?
I don't think we're going to eliminate that behavior, Dr. Hemming. I just don't. I think they're very clever. Whatever institutional effort is being made, they're very clever at pursuing their self-interest. I always come back and say, know what you did, saw that. We're not doing that again in that way because you took advantage of us, and you took advantage of the taxpayers, and that is not the policy that we were pursuing. So it is more one-on-one. I'm not interested in pantsing somebody in public over their behavior, but they should know that I know, and I'm happy to tell them.
Thanks.
Thank you. Candidate McCray, now to you. If elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water?
So I know in the 10th Water District here in Spokane County, I happen to be fortunate to be a part of a rather progressive water board. And one of the things that we've implemented is a scaled pricing situation, where the more water you use, the more you're going to be paying per gallon for that water. We've also implemented rules on when you're allowed to water, and we've also encouraged individuals within our water district to start planting native plants that are drought resistant. And we have seen, specifically in this last year since we moved to the current pricing plan that we have, a dramatic reduction on our worst offenders for using water. We used to have several customers that would use over 30,000 gallons of water in a month. They had 15, 20-acre lawns that they were watering, and because of the current pricing schedule, they have reduced the size of their yards. They've put in drought-resistant areas, and they now keep that specific green area around their yard. And they've come down to, they're still around 10,000 gallons of water they're using a month, but it's a dramatic reduction over the 30,000 gallons. And water districts that implement these kind of programs should be given priority when we start looking at grant money for their improvements. And when we start incentivizing these kind of actions for these different water districts, we can incentivize the water commissioners to start supporting ideas like this. Local water districts are their own elected board, and they have their own say on how they're going to do things. And so we need to create programs that encourage them to make wise decisions when it comes to how they use their water that they are allocated.
Thank you, Candidate McCrae. Candidate Kelso, if elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water? You have 2 minutes.
What he said. No, there's actually quite a few things that we can do. And coming late into this debate here, a lot of it has already been said. We need to come at it from a regulatory level, the carrot and stick approach. We need to continue to educate our constituents on better use of water. One thing that I have seen living in this area and driving through the city, I know we have rules on when it comes to irrigation of lawns, on what kind of sprinklers you can use. And I forgot the name of the sprinklers, but there's some, they just give you a very nice wide spray, and there are others where you just see numerous streams of water and they're circulate. Those use a lot less water. And it is in our laws that those are the sprinklers you're supposed to use. And yet I drive through the city and I see construction that's relatively new, and they have those other water wasting sprinklers. So ensuring that our, I'm assuming, building inspectors, the regulatory agencies that make sure that people follow the rules, that keep us safe, that they know and that they are able to enforce the rules. Businesses that do that should not be able to continue going to Idaho and buy the sprinklers. And I happen to know a business because I went and visited as part of my schooling. They go to Idaho and buy those sprinklers, and then they install them. Now, that's something very concrete, but we really want to make sure that we have adequate controls when it comes to letting people, you know, when they break the rules, we, yes, punish them. Sorry.
Thank you, Candidate Kelso. Finally to you, Candidate Riccelli. If elected, what would you support to regulate or incentivize the conservation of water?
Well, first, let's just focus on the important thing, because I think sometimes the shiny new object is a new policy intervention or a new tool, and conservation is where it's at, from energy to water. I would say there's a lot of really good things that have been said. I think we're particularly lucky to have folks who are water commissioners, et cetera, on this panel. For me, though, education's where it's at. I deal in public health. We see the success there. And I got to tell you, if you have one of those 30,000 a month gallon violators or overusers, and Susie, the second grader, comes home and says, "Dad, what are you doing?" Because she got educated. Because that's what we're seeing on climate. I got to tell you, we're seeing whole generations and younger generations shift the thinking of their parents and bringing that around. So I do think public education around that. Some of the carrots could be things such as, with our lawn, we have a sensor, and when the moisture's hit a certain level, it won't allow us to water. That's something that we're doing. Maybe we could offer programs to offer homeowners or folks, landscapers, to get into this. It's a boutique growing economy now to do xeriscaping and all kinds of different kinds of landscape architecture. So we need to work with those folks who are actually on the ground and showing the beauty in that. And so that whole conceptual change and shift in thinking is generational. I think a lot of public education and dollars that we can put in there and programs that we can work with business and with the folks who are putting in lawns, et cetera, is important. I do want to say some of the things that we're doing to keep our water clean are really important too. And you hear, first of all, it's always, no, we can't do that. So Senator Billig, who I'm running to replace, he said, we're going to take phosphorus out of our fertilizer, okay? And people freaked out. You know, things were okay when we did that. People went, you know, out of our dishwashing detergent, taking certain things out of that. Oh, everybody's going to go to Idaho. And you know what they did for a few months? And then industry caught up and they developed dishwashing detergent that was better for our aquifer and better for our water. So these are the types of things we need to do.
Given that education and awareness is such an important thing, if the Office of the Superintendent asked for additional funding to do this work, climate education in our K-12 public system, would that be something that you would then support if that's such an important part of the solution?
I think that when we look at curriculum, of course, a lot of that's local control, but if we can provide resource hubs in communities to go out, similar to what I'm working a lot on financial education, you know, it's great that local credit unions and banks go into classrooms to educate folks. If we can have trusted educational hubs working with local schools to provide the curriculum that is accurate, science-based, I think we'll see good results.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, candidates. Thank you for being with us tonight. As previously mentioned, one of the largest sources of climate pollution in our state comes from transportation. We need to transition to electric vehicles to reduce these emissions. However, we also fund roads and bridges from the sale of gasoline. How can we both reduce climate pollution from transportation and have safe, well-maintained roads and bridges? For instance, should Washington phase out gas taxes and shift to road use taxes? Candidate Hill, I believe it is your turn to go first. If elected to the state legislature, how would you reduce pollution from transportation while still funding road infrastructure? You have 2 minutes.
Well, I know that we're on our way, and we've set some really aggressive goals, and the Climate Commitment Act is under attack, unfortunately, but it is one of the drivers behind the policy changes that we're seeing, and that a lot of is around clean energy and electric. We have an amazing portfolio when it comes to renewable energy sources here in our state. We are leading the way nationwide when it comes to clean energy sources, and this impacts everything around us, our health, our water, and we have people here that have went even the extra mile. We have innovation and entities here that are growing. Carbon Quest is one of them in terms of capturing this carbon emission, because it's not going to disappear likely in my lifetime. I'm 42, so Tim's got some years on me here, and he's contributed, unfortunately, to the problems that we now have to deal with. And as he mentioned, we're looking to the future, and so we know it's going to take people behind us who are coming up who are going to have better ideas, and we're seeing that with entities like that we're growing right here in our city, as far as what we can do to address that and really focus on how do we, phase out our fossil fuels, right, and deal with the carbon emission that we have from them while bringing in these cleaner energy sources. So we have our wind, we have our hydropower, and electric, right? We have to get more people part of the system for it to become more affordable. I did purchase an electric vehicle, and I'll be the first one to say I have to buy a gas vehicle to figure out how I'm going to get to Olympia and back. There's nowhere to charge reliably between here and the west side, so we got to fix that. So I will definitely be a strong advocate for investments in electric energy. Again, I think it's really important that we also get correct information, because removing the carbon tax is not going to reduce gas prices. There are so many other factors. It's a commodity. These prices are preset. Gas companies are making record profits. They're enriching their shareholders, corporate buybacks. Let's go through all the layers that we need and stop pretending like a free market exists when it doesn't, and there's supremacy and regulations in place. Thank you.
Candidate Hill, just to clarify, so would you support a vehicle miles traveled instead of a gas tax as a way of funding them? Or, the CCA, the Climate Commitment Act, is uncertain, but we need some additional source of revenue. If gas sales are going down, which is good from a climate perspective, would you be willing to support something that would track vehicle miles traveled? The more you travel, the more you would pay, regardless of whether it was electric or not?
I would need more information, but I would say just from hearing this briefly, absolutely not. Who's disproportionately going to absorb that? People who are low income, people who are in poverty, people who already can't afford it. What if I have to travel farther for work because I happen to live in a rural community and I have to go further? I now am going to be looking at, after this election, moving to Olympia for 4 months and having to figure out that transportation aspect. So what I'm saying is until the investments are there, figuring out ways to tax folks that already don't have resources. We have to get away from thinking that we're not going to have innovation and competition by asking people who are already at the top to pay their fair share. We have to stop looking at the people who are impacted and asking them to pay more than their fair share to fix the problems that the people at the top created. So I would say on that surface level, who are we talking about? Because we've got a lot of people traveling long distances.
Typically, richer people are right now able to afford electric vehicles. Typically, poorer people are still driving internal combustion engines. So right now, poorer people are paying more gas tax than richer people who aren't paying any gas tax, but are still using the roads.
But that's the fallacy that the gas tax is increasing the cost of gas. Gas prices have been going down with the gas tax in place. They want to repeal it so that they can appease donors, right? I ran for Congress in 2022. This issue came up several times. My opponent, Kathy McMorris Rogers, has supported gas and oil companies. We've had representatives in this region supporting gas and oil companies. When have your gas prices gone down because of a tax? When have they gone up because of a tax? That is not what is setting gas prices, and there's a fallacy in that. And so to assume that if we have a tax, that the people who are using gas cars are going to be paying the higher extent of that is a fallacy based on how we're setting prices in the market. This is not how we're setting prices in the market. And if we had better regulation over oil companies and gas companies, and we didn't roll back those regulations in the last 2 decades, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about the wealth gap that's actually what's creating all this. We could have had investments in electric where it would be more affordable, and most of those people who are now driving gas cars could be driving electric cars and be in the same boat that I'm in. At the end of the day, we still need investments in infrastructure. What we need is investments in education, so people who are in these markets that can't afford it can be part of the solution. If we were investing in education in communities like I grew up in Hilliard, in one of the poorest zip codes in our poorest neighborhoods in our state, those people could be actually helping to create and build this and benefiting at the same time. But that's not what we're looking at. We're looking at profits over people, and we have to stop the misinformation of what sets gas prices.
Thank you, Candidate Hill. Candidate Keepy, same question to you. If elected to the state legislature, how would you reduce pollution from transportation while still funding road infrastructure? Please be specific.
I'll have to ask, is our technology there for electric cars? Do we need them to go more miles? As they go more miles, we're going to have to get tax revenue because that's tax revenue they're not paying. So yes, I see down the road that there will be a tax revenue. But the technology that is there is a hybrid car. I personally drive a hybrid car, and I've gone from 20 miles to 42 miles per gallon. I like that. I'm not paying as much in taxes, not paying as much in gas. One thing I would like to see on our gas pumps is how much you are paying for gasoline, how much you're paying for federal tax, how much are you paying for the state tax, how much are you paying for Initiative 2117? I would like to see that on there. We should all know these hidden gas taxes that we're on, it's not all going to the gasoline companies. The government's making more money than the gasoline companies. So let's stop that.
So if we got rid of taxes, would we replace that with something else?
Well, that's what I said at the beginning is, I think eventually, if everybody's driving an electric car, yes, there's going to be some kind of tax increase. We have to find
so
that
you would
revenue.
be in favor of another tax to replace those taxes?
For those who have electric cars, yes, you would have to.
Okay.
Because our economy runs on the taxes captured at the gas pump.
Based on vehicle miles traveled?
If you're well, I would think you'd have to look at how many miles traveled.
So we need to track that, how many miles each person drives?
I would say eventually, yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Candidate Ormsby, same question to you. If elected to the state legislature, how would you reduce pollution from transportation while still funding road infrastructure? Please be specific.
Yeah, so I think vehicle miles traveled, a road use tax, I support that as an alternative. I didn't think about it until this question just now, that it's kind of either or, because folks doing VMT, road use tax, that have an internal combustion engine would be getting it twice, right? And so, And our biggest barrier to getting to the vehicle miles traveled and the road use tax is culture. It is the way all the transportation advocates have been about concrete and asphalt. And yes, they're fine with traffic calming and all the rest of it, but they want to build stuff. And I come out of that culture, and I understand it. And they want to do it just the way they've always been able to do it. And it's been with the gas tax. And we have this thing called the 18th Amendment in Washington State that is monies taxed for transportation have to be used for transportation. And that has largely been the gas tax. Now, if it was a vehicle miles traveled and road use tax, but so many folks believe that any tax on petroleum products should go to roads and to transportation. That is not true, because we have this hazardous substance tax, which is refineries, pesticides, all the nasty stuff that we tax. And part of it is petroleum products, and it is protected from transportation because it has a specific designated use for cleanups. So I hadn't thought about this as either or, and I think I'll just have to reconsider that. But I think the fairest way to do it for internal combustion and for electric vehicles is investing in the infrastructure and base it on how much time you're on the road, how many miles you're traveling. I think that's an elegant solution, but we have challenges getting there.
Thank you. Candidate McCray, same question to you. If elected to the state legislature, how would you reduce pollution from transportation while still funding road infrastructure? You have 2 minutes.
So those who use the roads do have to help pay for them. And so at this time, I don't know that I would immediately support a tax on miles traveled, but it's something that we are going to have to look at in the future. As we move away from the internal combustion engine, especially in this state with some of the policies that have been passed, we are going to have to look to alternative funding mechanisms. And so the individuals that are out there on the road are going to have to pay for those roads to be maintained. And so it's something that we will have to look at. And so right now, as a method of encouraging people to move to that, I wouldn't immediately support it, but it's something that we are going to have to move to in the future. And it's the only way that I can reliably and fairly see that we pay for our roads to be maintained in a proper fashion.
To clarify, is there any immediate funding mechanisms that you would support?
Right now, we have the funding mechanisms in place that are paying for our roads to be maintained, but as we move away from the internal combustion engine, those funding mechanisms are going to be reduced, and we are going to have to move towards something like a miles traveled situation.
Thank you. Candidate Kelso, same question to you. If elected to the state legislature, how would you reduce pollution from transportation while still funding road infrastructure? Again, please be specific.
So one thing that I've not heard anybody address is public transportation. The more people we can get onto public transportation, especially those short trips, the less we use our roads. I would love to see much further reach of our public transportation into the outlying areas. When you go to a miles traveled, you're punishing people who live in rural areas. We're already having problems maintaining communities and making sure they can be resilient communities in our outlying areas. We will not be able to have doctors willing to live in places like Republic in Ferry County or in Cusick or in Omak, because whenever they have to go somewhere, it's going to cost them, and I'm just making stuff up right now, $100 in road tax, right? It's made up. I know it's too much, but we need to figure out a way to allow people to travel distances without having to mortgage their house. Now, when we improve our public transportation system, the roads will be less used, there will be less need to maintain them. And then when we are at a point where most everyone is on electric vehicles, or is taking the light rail, or is taking the little scooters and whatever you have, then we can look at those who continue to drive vehicles and maybe start a miles driven. But if we're looking at a lot of people with electric cars who cannot charge at home, like renters, maybe we'll add at the charging stations, at the long distance charging stations, add a surcharge on that. Because the other question that no one's been able to answer is, how are we going to track and how are we going to get people to pay? If you travel 12,000 miles a year, are you going to get a $12,000 fee or, you know, something like that at the end of the year? So.
Thank you. Candidate Riccelli, same question to you. If elected to the state legislature, how would you reduce pollution from transportation while still funding road infrastructure?
I think we definitely need to look at vehicle miles traveled. I think it's a potential alternative to supplant what folks are paying right now in a regressive way. One of the big impediments to that in the past has been people's concerns with privacy. Here's what I got to tell you. If you're walking around with one of these, you don't have to worry about vehicle miles traveled. And there's ways that we can do it that can protect privacy and make sure people are paying their fair share. I also think there's a couple things we can do to put us in that direction where there could be an alternative where people could say, I'm going to choose as we transition vehicle miles traveled or to pay gas tax at the pump. One of the big things that we could do is move our public fleets onto vehicle miles traveled as a test case. And also, I spoke with a Republican business owner who does long-haul trucking in the Valley. You know what? He supports vehicle miles traveled because right now he's already giving all that information to the federal government anyway. So I think that there's some interim steps that we can take to move forward with that policy. We do hit a cliff in transportation funding. One thing I think we shouldn't do is repeal the Climate Commitment Act because, you know what? There goes free youth transit. There goes the money that we invested, and Andy and Tim and I worked really hard to get for Division Bus Rapid Transit. So sorry for that plug as well, but I'm here to talk about all the issues.
Thank you. Candidate Wilson, same question to you. If elected to the state legislature, how would you reduce pollution from transportation while still funding road infrastructure?
Okay, everybody hold up your red card. There's something.
I'm a soccer referee. I don't know. I'm just confused.
There's something wrong. I had to go visit my son in South Carolina a couple months ago. He's in the Air Force. I got my rental car, drove off of the airport, and the first sign I saw was gas $1.89 a gallon. I gassed up a couple days ago here in Spokane, $4.09. The state's making more money per gallon than Exxon. Well, I don't like it either, but it's the truth. There's something wrong, and the people that are getting penalized are not you people sitting in this room. It's the poorest people in our neighborhoods. Those are the ones who are taking it in the shorts because they have to drive like we do. They can't afford Teslas. They can't afford hybrids. They're driving what they can drive. In the long term, it's going to be technology that serves us. Electric cars are great, but I don't think we should put all our eggs in one basket because there are other technologies that are probably better for the environment in the long run, namely hydrogen. And the University of Illinois is developing, actually taking carbon and turning it into energy. They've further developed a battery. It's not going to be imminent, but that's the future, is technology. We will eventually wield off, for the most part, fossil fuels. But for right now, we have to deal with reality. And the reality is most of us, none of the people in this room have this problem, but there are a lot of poor people that are getting poorer because of inflation. And I think we need to take those people into consideration before we go and do radical ideas.
So are you
hold your red cards
advocating for getting rid of the gas tax?
Pardon?
How would you pay for roads and bridges if you get rid of the gas tax?
Well, I think we need to lower the gas tax down to a reasonable level.
So how would you fill that gap that you created?
Well, the state government in the last 12 years has increased its budget from $31 billion, which is a lot, to over $70 billion.
So what would you cut?
I'm not sure. But I think there's room in a $2 billion a day from the state. And there are legitimate functions of government. I'm not arguing that. But there's a lot of other things that we can cut, and I'm not sure what they are because I haven't gone that in depth into the budget.
Thank you.
Candidates, for our next question, I'd like to discuss how we will meet our state goals to reduce the burning of fossil fuels that are causing the climate to change. As some of you have already mentioned, this year there are two measures on the ballot, I-2066 and I-2117, which would, if they pass, make it very difficult to reduce the burning of fossil fuels and the heat-trapping emissions that come from them. If these ballot initiatives pass, what legislation would you support to help reduce the burning of fossil fuels such as natural gas or methane? Candidate Keepy, first to you this time. If ballot measures 2066 and 2117 pass, greatly limiting the state's ability to address climate change, what specific legislation would you support in order to reduce the burning of fossil fuels?
I'm going to vote yes on all the initiatives that you brought them up. 2066 is a gas ban. Do you know what it's going to cost to replace your gas stove, your gas heater? That's going to cost a lot of money. We're talking about rent. Landlords got to charge more for the rent if this goes in place. So think about the poor. Think about the person that lives on a fixed income. They're paying the most for these items. 2117 is a hidden gas tax. We paid an extra 42 cents a gallon of tax. I see a lot of students in here. That's $5 a tank every time you buy a tank of gas. Where is all that money going? I mean, we have to look at that. I mean, here, I brought the article with me, right here. We don't know what to believe or not to believe anymore. This is Dr. Vin Gupta. He claims here in Spokane, our air's gotten dirtier, or cleaner. He claims it got dirtier. He got fact-checked by Washington Policy Center. No, our air's gotten cleaner, over 20% cleaner over the years. That is a fact. So we have to look at the facts. What's happening out there? I will vote yes because I don't want the person on a fixed income, the person making minimum wage, have to pay these extra taxes. Where will we find it? Well, when I read Steve Gornum, he talked about 1 to 2%. Is that an effective goal, 1 to 2%? Is that effective goal, 1 or 2%? Wow, that makes a big difference. So I don't think 1 to 2% change is really what we're looking for. How much do we need to raise to hit our goals? We have aggressive goals, very aggressive goals. Let's go step it up, one go at a time, hit a go, until we know, will 1 or 2% make a big difference? You know, what I liked was the ice glaciers. They're melting. I was in Alaska in June. Yes, they are melting.
So if the ice caps are melting and they're going to continue melting, if we keep burning fossil fuels, but you would support not allowing ourselves to reduce the use of fossil fuels because you're going to vote in favor of those initiatives, what would you support in order to achieve the same? How would you reduce fossil fuels in other ways? So if we limit our ability to regulate methane and we eliminate the cap and trade system and eliminate a state cap on emissions, what other legislation would you support? Or is it not a concern that the ice caps are melting, as you just said?
I like what Steve Gurnham said about the ice caps. They're melting, but what, 5,000 years ago?
So you're not actually concerned about that after all?
No, let me answer the question. They're trees. So it was frozen at one time, but also there was woods. Now it's frozen again. It's gradually melting. Will there be woods? Is that a natural occurrence? I mean, we have
so
to
just to
think about
clarify,
that.
would you support anything to reduce fossil fuel use?
If it's more tax that hurts the vulnerable, low income, I will not support another tax.
Thank you. Candidate Ormsby, next to you this time. If ballot measures 2066 and 2117 pass, greatly limiting the state's ability to address climate change, what specific legislation would you support in order to reduce the burning of fossil fuels?
I don't want to think about them passing. Gives me major anxiety. So as the budget writer, we'd be losing $2 billion that we, to your previous question about transportation infrastructure, electric vehicle charging stations, you know, getting transmission lines up to speed, using technology, all of those things. That's $2 billion of investments that we'd be having to directly impact climate, and that's not going to be there. I don't support 2117. I think the other one on natural gas, this is what we have been talking about. People were up in arms when the State Building Codes Council did regulatory intervention so that we didn't be using gas appliances. The world did not come crumbling down. This is the direction that we have to go. The other two initiatives, not directly related, but would be serious impacting the state budget, and that's the capital gains tax, and I think there's 85 people in this county that pay it, and they can keep paying it. And the consequences of not having that is going to put our education system in real jeopardy. And the Long-Term Care Act. Now, I mentioned earlier, I'm 65, so I'm no kid and I'm not getting any younger, and I don't even know that this will benefit. But we have got to have a plan in place to take care of our folks that are aging, and they have to be able to age in place. I'm not supporting any of the initiatives. So what is the plan? I've had these conversations with some of our subject matter experts, including climate, long-term care, and our tax code, and they are very nervous about the prospects of doing something as an alternative if they do pass. We will come out swinging, but it will be a challenge.
So could you share it all? So you hope that they don't pass. If they do, and they create these deficits in the programs that you're mentioning, and you help write the budget for the House, so you don't yet have a plan about how to replace that revenue.
We have to raise more revenue otherwise, right? I mean, from other sources, and the appetite. Sorry. One of the most difficult things, and I can say this from experience, seeing the legislature as an ecosystem, one of the hardest things to do is raise revenue. And for a good cause, we finally got the capital gains tax in place. We finally got the Climate Commitment Act in place and the long-term CARES in place. It took years to get them in place, and they could all go in one fell swoop, and I do not like the prospects of dealing with budget impacts. I think politicians are right there with used car salesmen and other folks, in terms of popularity. I'm fine with that, but it's only going to get worse.
Thank you. Candidate McCray, now to you. If ballot measures 2066 and 2117 pass, greatly limiting the state's ability to address climate change, what specific legislation would you support in order to reduce the burning of fossil fuels? You have 2 minutes.
First of all, we have to make sure they don't pass. I wrote the brief for the party on I-2066, and this is a horribly written bill. It removes the regulatory authority of local jurisdictions at the city, county, and the state level to regulate natural gas. It requires that if natural gas is offered at anywhere within a company's service area, that if anybody in that area demands it, it must be delivered and offered to individuals in that area. It does not state who has to pay to deliver it to that person. So that company is going to have to put in service lines to the street line. Now the person's going to have to pay from the street to their house, but the company has to pay to get it there. So if one customer, let's say on the South Hill, under a Vista, gets natural gas, and somebody under a Vista in Deer Park wants it, a Vista has to provide it to that individual in Deer Park. And it also specifically in that bill states that no new legislation can have the term climate change in it. That means that we can no longer discuss this at the legislative level or at the initiative level because of the wording in that bill. And so we must make sure that that bill does not pass. And as far as I-2117, we can't take $2 billion out of our budget. Because then the question is what do we start cutting? Because we cannot immediately start replacing that kind of money out of our budget. And it also comes with what's going to come out of our education budget with the other initiatives. And so all 4 of these initiatives are going to have dramatic impacts on what we are able to offer at the state level.
Thank you. Candidate Kelso, now to you. If ballot measures 2066 and 2117 pass, greatly limiting a state's ability to address climate change, what specific legislation would you support in order to reduce the burning of fossil fuels?
Just like Stephen here, I helped him with the research on 2066, and it is just horrifying that we just listened to some folks here say, if we don't implement these measures, then the poor people going to pay for it. No, the poor people going to pay for if they pass, because what Stephen just said, we, the customers, are going to get that cost passed on. If you thought a Vista was expensive now, and I know it is because I have inland power, it's going to be much more expensive. And a Vista has a far reach. So that scenario that Stephen brought forward is very, very possible, right? And what happened to let the people control, right? This takes local control away, right? Spokane won't be able to make rules. Spokane County won't be able to make rules. Deer Park won't be able to make rules. All of that is out of the window. So here we have someone putting some authoritarian measures in place that we then cannot change. We cannot let that happen. When it comes to, what was the other one? 2417, I get numbers mixed up, sorry. We've let corporations get away with not paying their fair share when it comes to the damages they do. And that's what that Climate Commitment Act did. They have to pay for what they're doing, right? Yes, they can pass that on to us, but first they have to pay for it. And we can take control over those expenses by limiting our own consumption. But we need to make sure that corporations, the biggest polluters, pay for their fair share. And it is much easier to collect it from them than from all of us. Thank you.
Thank you. Candidate Riccelli, now to you. If ballot measures 2066 and 2117 pass, greatly limiting the state's ability to address climate change, what specific legislation would you support in order to reduce the burning of fossil fuels?
I'm in the boat too, that we just have to do everything we can to make sure that we don't roll back the Climate Commitment Act. That would be devastating to our state budgets. That would be that create huge holes in progressive policy that we brought forward that are really putting us on track. We need to continue to lead in this area. Washington is a beacon for the rest of the country and how we can do this. And also it leads to other great economic benefits too as we move in this. We can create green collar jobs like no other. We can put people to work, et cetera. So, I mean, the question is not what we do after it, it's what we do between now and Election Day. I'm an organizer at heart. We have to go out there and make sure the message is going. Some of the messages that we do need to fall back on too, though, is, you know, this idea that people that don't agree with this just got it wrong. You know, we need to engage in discourse. For example, a lot of people just don't understand a heat pump now can serve in cold water. What I heard back in Olympia a lot was, or cold weather. What I heard back in Olympia is that this won't work for Eastern Washington. Well, that's just not the case. The technology exists, right? So we need to continue to educate folks, and when technology is working, we need to make sure that we're honest about it and sharing that. So I'm really concerned about the things that could be rolled back, from one of the most popular things that we've passed, and that's free youth transit, to the things that we're doing here in Spokane, like Division Bus Rapid Transit, et cetera, to all the funding that was in some part really going after reducing and mitigating and investing in communities that have been disproportionately impacted by climate change. That all comes up. So once again, we talk about, you know, our most vulnerable. We're not circling back to how they would be hurt if we remove this as well. The other initiatives, very briefly, I am going to speak on the aging and long-term care initiative. About half the folks have $50,000 or less when they retire, and that's not enough.
Thank you. Candidate Wilson, now to you. If ballot measures 2066 and 2117 do pass, greatly limiting the state's ability to address climate change, what specific legislation would you support in order to reduce the burning of fossil fuels?
Thank you. hold up your red cards. The Climate Control Act raised $1.5 billion last year, and it had zero impact in changing anything having to do with climate change. None of the programs were given to climate change that made any effect, any measurable effect. Part of the problem we have in Olympia is we start programs with questionable objectives without any ways to measure their effectiveness. This one had no effect. Regarding the gas, I'm going to go back to that other thing. 2016 and 2018, the voters voted down Climate Act, climate control. The legislature did it anyway. I think the legislature has to take a serious look at doing what the voters want. I think that's important, to listening to both sides. Regarding natural gas, you have to admit that I think the demands on electricity are growing every day with every appliance, from cell phones to televisions to the whole thing. If we implement AI, which is an incredible demand on electricity, we're going to need more electricity. If we remove gasoline from the natural gas from the equation, it's going to implement a tremendous drag. According to my people at Avista, it'll raise the electricity rates 70 to 80%. That's from Avista. You don't have to like it. I don't like it, but that's what they tell me. And it makes sense. And the retrofit, if they get to the point where we have to retrofit all of our gas heat, our gas stoves, whatever it is, would be tremendous effect, especially on the poorest. And it's unnecessary.
So the premise of the question was that they do pass. So those programs are ended. So would you support anything in their place in order to be able to transition us off of using fossil fuels, or would you not support any alternatives and allow us to continue to increasingly use fossil fuels?
I don't want them to pass. I want them to pass.
Right, so we're assuming they
Yes.
pass.
Right.
So the Climate Commitment Act is gone.
The state does not need the additional revenue.
Right, so my question is about fossil fuels.
Okay.
Right, so if we eliminate those tools, we don't have them anymore. Would you support any new tools to regulate, reduce, incentivize the reduction of fossil fuels in some other way?
I don't think we have the technology to do the things we want to do. And these initiatives, I mean, these laws that are in the books right now, don't do it either.
So we don't know how to reduce fossil fuels?
We don't know how to do it effectively at this point. I don't think so.
Okay.
I think the technology will be here someday, but it's not here now. And I think it makes people feel good when we do these things, but it doesn't do any good in real life. That's just the truth. So I think we need to take a look at things that we can measure the effectiveness. None of these have an effective measurement aspect to them.
Thanks.
One more question. Would you support research into new climate technology?
Absolutely. I mean, I was just talking about the University of Illinois coming up with new technologies to use CO2, which is a primary cause of global warming, and turning it into energy, which I think would be a brilliant thing. That's why I say we don't put all our eggs in one basket, meaning electric cars. I have a little bit perspective, probably more than anybody in this room, of wisdom because of my age. But I learned to question. Well, maybe not everybody. Back in the 60s, we questioned authority. That was our thing when we were in college. And I still do. You look at the people who sponsor all the 20 seconds. I can't do it. I'll talk to you after if you want.
Thank you. Finally to you, candidate Hill, if ballot measures 2066 and 2117 do pass, greatly limiting the state's ability to address climate change, what specific legislation would you support in order to reduce the burning of fossil fuels?
I mean, I think we've heard there isn't any alternatives, and that's what's so disappointing, is that to say we should roll things back and start from scratch when you're hearing from people who've been in office saying that we've worked really hard. These are things that didn't pass by one party. These are bipartisan bills with a lot of work. So I also, am voting no on all of these measures. I think my future seatmate Tim Ormsby mentioned 85 people who are paying the capital gains tax. And when it comes to carbon emission, I think it's really also unfortunate that folks just dismiss and ignore actual facts and data. Facts are an inconvenient truth, I get it. As an attorney who's practiced over 17 years, if you can't get your evidence in, you don't got nothing for the court to rely on. Just because you said it, don't make it so. And that's the reality. We are capturing carbon emissions because of this measure. And if we roll it back, that is not going to incentivize companies like the ones that I mentioned that are actually growing and innovating here in Spokane. So to say that these acts do nothing is very dismissive to all of us and our intelligence. And it's unfortunate that people are sitting up here using very condescending language and being very dismissive. Because in 25 years, in 2050, some of these people up here ain't gonna be here. I'm 42, in 25 years, I'm gonna be 67, I'm looking at retiring. So I know some of these people are not gonna be here. And what they're concerned about is themselves and what they're gonna control when they're dead, and they're not thinking about the future. And that's why we're here on this campus at Gonzaga talking about things that are gonna impact the future, not the past. You ain't rolling stuff back to the 60s and 70s. I wasn't even alive then. It's insulting that when you're speaking on behalf of poor people, did you live that life? Have you talked to them? I disagree with you. You absolutely have not showed up to the neighborhoods that have been most impacted by climate change. You absolutely have not, and I haven't seen you there. And I haven't seen you there, and you haven't been there, but you want to speak on behalf of poor people, but you don't want to show up and listen. You got a whole bunch of people with red cards, and you're dismissing their opinions right here, real time. We need candidates who show up and listen. I hope you all vote in November.
Thank you.
All right, I think that we are ready to move to final statements. So each candidate, you have 90 seconds, and we'll just continue with our current rotation, which I think has us with candidate Ormsby. If you'd like to make a closing statement for 90 seconds, please feel free.
Thank you again to the Climate Institute, to Gonzaga University, and to our student leaders for hosting us and having this event that's been very informative to me. I really want to go back to something Representative Riccelli said earlier about how kids are bringing home education, teaching their parents about the running water, about don't burn that, that goes in the recycling bin. I'm still working on myself, but I have to justify this to my 3 kids, and they're a gauntlet to get through. They range in age from the mid-30s to the mid-40s, and I dread just casual conversations with them sometimes because I don't want to display my ignorance to folks that are in a position to know more and do more and be better. And they're leading by example for me, and I just can't emphasize enough that the leadership coming from generations behind me, I've done this plenty long enough, we're going to rely on you to come up with the innovation and the character to keep biodiversity, to keep climate from cooking our planet, and we're in a position to take care of each other.
Thank you, Candidate Ormsby. Candidate McCray, you have 90 seconds if you'd like to have any concluding thoughts.
First, I would like to thank you for having me here today. I've really enjoyed being here. I personally believe that this election is one of the most consequential elections that we'll ever see. Up and down the ballot, we see individuals that are radicalized in directions that are, to me personally, terrifying. And how we choose to engage in this election this year and how we choose to vote is going to have an impact that's going to last far longer than I think many of us actually understand. And I'm hoping that people that have come to see us here today, and as well as are participating in other parts of this election, truly understand the full impact of what their vote is going to have this year. I also hope that people are reaching out to individuals that they know that don't traditionally vote and are ensuring that they're going to be returning their ballot. One of the biggest failures that we've seen is when people do not turn their ballots back in. When we see certain parts of Spokane County that have 20 and 25% ballot returns in general elections like this, I believe it is a huge failure of our electorate. And I'm hoping that you reach out to people that you know that don't traditionally vote and encourage them to return their ballots. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate McCray. Candidate Kelso?
Yes, thank you to all of you for showing up. It is sometimes hard to do the right thing when you have a difficult life, and you guys showed up, and I can only promise to do the same to help everyone. My friend Stephen here, his motto is, everyone's future matters. And I can't agree with that more if I had made it up myself. I want to make sure that we don't have to worry about being lied to, being told that our opinions don't matter, and that we don't see the facts in front of our faces. That's gaslighting, and we're trying to shut that off too, right? It's just another form of fossil fuel. Overall, I'm hoping that we can all get together. There are good people in this room. I'm sure that there are very conservative people who have good ideas, and they might not be brave enough to speak up because of the pressure they've had from their colleagues. So please, if you know somebody who might have a good idea but is afraid to speak up, talk to them. Reach out to your friends, encourage them to vote. Our future depends on it. I plan on living to be about 100, maybe 110. I have a long time to go to that. So, thank you so much for having us.
Thank you. And Candidate Riccelli?
Well, thanks so much for this opportunity, and it's always great to be back on campus. You know, I could make the easy appeal, send a ZAG back to Olympia, but that seems a little cheap. So I'll go on the issues here. And to the students directly, and particularly those who are getting educated here, I know you're volunteering in record numbers. You feel like the system's rigged, but we gotta show up. We need you. If you're here more than, more time than not, where maybe you're voting back home or whatever, consider where that vote is gonna have the biggest impact on the policies you care about most. I want to thank Molly Marshall, who's running for county commissioner, for coming up here, but also sitting through all this, so that's pretty awesome. Look, I'm ready to take on this challenge, and I'm going to continue to fight, and I think on the issues we're discussed, I will be a strong supporter, and I'll also commit to learn and be educated, to listen, and try to do the right thing. It's not just my children's future that is at stake, it's the folks, everybody needs to thrive in our community, regardless of the zip code they're born in. So the effects of climate change have far-reaching consequences for us all. If we do not take action, we're gonna face devastating environmental consequences, but also economic and social consequences as well. So we need a more resilient future. I'm driven by a conviction that our children should inherit a world that's better than the one that we have. And I'm committed to protecting this immense, beautiful piece. By the way, check out Glen Tana and Waikiki Springs, something that I've been passionately working on. We've been able to preserve land. I'll be a continued, stop. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Riccelli. Candidate Wilson?
Now hold up your green cards, because I think we can all agree on what we're trying to accomplish. We may have differing opinions, but I think it's important to understand where I'm coming from. If we can have legislation dealing with climate change and the environment, I want the programs that we're initiating to work. And in order to do that, we need specific objectives. When we designate $1 or $2 billion towards something, I want to know exactly what we're trying to accomplish and how we're going to measure it. So then if some lunatic comes up here and says, man, that's not working, then you can actually come back and say, it is working because here's why how we're measuring it. Or someone says, we're spending these $2 billion, aren't we great? And someone challenges that aspect and says, it's not working, we're going to have specific information to say it is, there is, or isn't. And we don't have that in the legislation coming out of Olympia today. We're doing feel-good things, maybe with the right intention, but not accomplishing the things we need to do to accomplish all the goals that we're in this room to accomplish. which is save our grandchildren, save our planet, save our environment. Nobody's against that. I want real change with real objectives and measurable objectives. Okay? Thanks for having me here.
Thank you, Candidate Wilson. Candidate Hill, would you have any concluding thoughts?
Thank you. Thank everyone for being here and for your hosting, for our commentators with questions. This is a really important institute that we have, and I hope that in the future we don't see cuts, but we see growth. I intend, as I mentioned before, to be a champion for communities that I belong to that are sometimes overlapping, but oftentimes are the communities that are left behind and voices that aren't heard. I intend to speak up on behalf of those communities and make sure people who come from impoverished backgrounds, who are the least resourced, aren't being told what they need, aren't being told how they feel, but are actually being listened to. So my goal is to bring those stories to the forefront and make sure that our current electeds are hearing those as well. I have really, really tall shoes to fill with Marcus stepping into the Senate and being able, and knowing that my future seatmate Tim Ormsby is running on limited time. Those are the realities. We have more people to bring in, and I want our environment to be as rich and diverse as the people in it. And as you can see from the panel up here, we don't exhibit a ton of diversity. We have 2 women candidates up here. We have 1 candidate of color. I will be the first candidate of color elected to office, and that means something, especially to the communities that I belong to, because disproportionately, domestic workers, women, single parents, people of color, people from poverty. If we fix poverty, we fix everything. So in dealing with environmental policy, my biggest goal is making sure that the people at the top pay their fair share so that the people at the bottom are not the ones disproportionately fixing our environment. Thank you.
Thank you, Candidate Hill. And finally, Candidate Keepy.
Well, I want to thank everybody for coming tonight. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot. That's what I'm here, to learn a lot, see what everybody has to say, the issues that you're compassionate about. I would have loved to seen the other commissioners here, the other representatives here, because how do we exchange ideas if we're not listening to each other? We need to be here. We need to hear from you. I mean, I will represent you. I am for the people. This is your seat. It's not my seat. I'm going to do what's best for you, not for me. That's why I'm running. But we need to have that conversation. As I've been doorbelling, so many people say the Republicans don't talk to the Democrats. The Democrats don't talk to Republicans. I want to change that. Let's work together. Let's help the people in the state of Washington and District 3.
Thank you very much. For the last 6 years, one of the goals of this, and it's really, I think, very well represented by our event this evening, is to create an opportunity for respectful dialogue about a difficult issue, and I think we largely did that well. You all were really good about maintaining the rules of engagement, and I thank you for that. In just a little more than a week, the county will begin mailing ballots, if you can believe it. It feels like the election has been going forever. And our hope is that no matter how you vote, this nonpartisan forum will help you understand where the candidates stand on the issue of climate change. We're excited that the League of Women Voters and our other co-sponsors are here tonight, and we'd encourage you to visit their tables after the event. By way of conclusion, I like to always end with a brief portion from Pope Francis's comments on the White House lawn when he last visited in 2015. He said, "It seems clear to me that climate change is a problem which can no longer be left to a future generation. When it comes to the care of our common home, we are living at a critical moment of history." So let's thank the candidates for taking time to be here tonight. And let's give a really extra ZAG thank you to our wonderful student moderators as well. CJ and Jordan were really nice to be able to jump into this scary sort of role, and I think they did a really wonderful job. Thank you all for being here, and please don't forget the climate when you vote. Thanks. See you next year.